And then I'll make sure that those are posted on Canvas, likely be the day after each class. But I just wanted to get this started with an opening question. One more quick poll. Who watched any of the inauguration yesterday? And it looks like we got almost everyone responding. And so it looks like about 3/4 of you watched it. Would anyone be willing to share kind of like major takeaways, any reflections from that?
I can
Garth
one thing.
Brooks.
Oh,
sorry, this is not even a good input, but Garth Brooks singing Amazing Grace was weird.
I was just gonna say that Amanda Gorman's poem was amazing. I've like rewatched it. It was incredible. So if anyone hasn't seen that, I recommend it.
I didn't watch the actual inauguration, but I seen Bernie Sanders popped out with a nice set of mittens and a parka.
That seemed to be one of the main takeaways for a lot of folks. Any other takeaways?
He's been sufficiently memed.
Yeah.
Of course. Thanks, internet.
Yeah, no, I think as several of you said right off the bat, that just it's much more of an event, I guess, than I remember in the past. I mean, from the poems, the readings, the speeches to the musicians, that I was looking at it, you know, in and out, but then just trying to catch up with all the highlights. It quite the event. So with that said, opening question, can anyone name a couple of the executive orders that were signed yesterday?
Yeah, he actually signed 17 executive orders yesterday. And some of the highlights were we rejoined the Paris Climate Accord, 100-day mask mandate, halting construction at the border, revoking the Keystone XL pipeline, and there were a couple other big, just a lot of rollbacks of Trump era policies, which is very good to see.
We're working with WHO again, which is awesome. And he's actually sending Fauci, I believe it's today, to the WHO conference to represent the United States, which is awesome.
Thank you. And amazing just to see how quickly, you know, so much is happening. And I think often we hear with presidents that first 90 days is really pivotal. So, you know, this is not a public policy class, but I do think as it's relevant, because that does affect, you know, all industries in our countries, I do just want to be kind of highlighting that. And so as you're seeing different things, you know, feel free to bring that up and bring that into the class as well. With that said, I sent an email last night. We did, from the student board, just receive feedback. I think we're all adjusting to the fact that this is a virtual format, and that's not how this class was traditionally run. And so absolutely, I do want to make sure that we're going to be having opportunities to meet one-on-one. So I will put in the chat bar. I wanted to just get feedback on what type of experience that would be best. So a quick survey, and really what I'm asking about is whether this is better to be optional participation of, you know, meeting with myself, or it could be meeting with Leah or our other faculty supports, whether it's better optional or required. And I ask that not to say, you know, do we want it optional, that it's not a forced thing, but acknowledge the fact if it is optional and it's not required, are you going to be taking advantage of that opportunity? So I think I do have one more poll related to that. No, that's another one. So if we could just spend, I put it in the chat, let me know if that's not working for anyone, but if you could just spend a minute or two answering that poll, and then give me the virtual thumbs up when you're done, and we'll get started again. I think just waiting on a couple more. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And so, like I said, we'll make sure that there will definitely be opportunities, whether it's after class, before class, or we'll have dedicated time to make sure that's happening. We want this to be the best experience for you. And with that said, we're, audibling in real time. So we'll start every day with announcements. This is also your opportunity, as several of you are in leadership roles with your organizations. Make sure you're speaking up and sharing out of events and activities that you have coming up. So with that said, anything that folks do want to be sharing out? All right. So we'll go ahead and get started today. Many of you already submitted the social enterprise organization that you'd like to work with. In just a moment, we'll select dates. And for those of you that haven't picked an organization yet, please pick an organization. And then I'll walk through what an example looks like. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in real time, and then just see what that looks like. From that, we're going to be talking about what does the impact job landscape look like, both for yourselves, as many of you are going to be embarking on your professional journeys after this semester, but then more broadly, nationally, and as you look more medium to long term in your careers. Then we'll talk about our service learning projects as well a little bit if we have time, and we will break. So has everyone utilized the anecdote function to be able to essentially write in? If you could just pick the date, and if you have not yet selected an organization, if you could select the name of the organization you would like to work with. Historically, we would use this on a whiteboard. The other thing that we can do is, if you just want to put it in the chat bar, what date you would like to present and what organization you would like to present. Perfect. Matthew's got it. So we will have up to 3 presenters per day. We don't need to fill all days because we do not have 27 folks in class. Looks like we got it. In the past, we've always done this on the whiteboard, and I'm excited to see technology working with us this morning. And I have not utilized this as much, so it looks like a few of you are drawing lines. Can someone that has written this share out easiest steps to do that?
Yeah, under the annotate, yeah, if you find that in it's under the view options tab, and then you hit annotate, and the second option in from the left should be a text bar, and then you can just sort of put just a text box in wherever you want on the page.
Okay.
Wait, where is this document to write on?
Just on the screen, at the top of your screen, there should be a drop-down menu that says View Options, and then right under Annotate is in the same little section as Request Remote Control and Exit Full Screen. And if you hit Annotate, you should be able to type. But if you're in the like the Google Chrome, like if you're using Zoom on your web browser, you might not be able to do it. But if you're using it in the app, you should be able to.
And so if you are having questions using Annotate, please feel free to just put it in the chat bar. It looks like all the dates other than the 9th still have one spot available.
Is anyone sure how you can move the text box after you're done typing?
I've been trying to as well, and I think you can. It's fine.
Yeah.
I see yours. We're just both on 316.
I think when I've tried to move it in the past, I've just had to like delete it and do it again. But I don't have a better way than that.
Yeah, I was going to say it might be easiest to just, yeah, delete and redo it. And really the important thing is the fact in Canvas, you're able to submit your organization as well. So as long as I'm not seeing any duplicates here, then the important thing is just your name on which date you would like to present. And when you go under assignments on Canvas, you'll see that the written portion of this assignment is not due until the end of the semester. I would encourage all of you to submit the information the same date you're presenting, since you're going to be presenting, that same information that you've already done research on. I know we all have a nature of procrastinating, but I think it's best just to get this completed. All right. Are we still waiting on anyone else to submit? All right, Anna and Ashley are on 323, so it looks like 323 is filled. Oh, Anna is saying, yeah, 323. And 316 is filled then again with Madison. All right, is that everyone, I think? Perfect. I'm taking a screenshot of this. I'm going to stop sharing for a second just so I can capture that. And like I said, we'll have that in the Canvas as well, that if you haven't submitted your organization, please just go ahead and submit that. I'll follow up if anyone seems to have a duplicate organization, but a quick scan, it looks like we do all have different organizations. So I just want to spend now a couple minutes giving an example of what one of these presentations is going to look like. The idea is both continuing to practice your public speaking as you're in likelihood, whichever organization or career path you take, you're going to have to practice public speaking. And so it's a share out of a little bit of the research that you've done. Students are able to ask, questions if there's follow-ups. And our goal is, as the semester continues on, to start to pull out themes of what organizations are doing, what their financial models look like, the clients that they're serving, where are we seeing that intersectionality of, who are other community partners. So I wanted to share about Pollen today because they're going to be one of the organizations that we're going to hear about next Thursday, and that many of you are going to be doing a semester-long project on. So Pollen Midwest actually started from a college student like yourselves that really felt like he wanted to build a community of like-minded folks that were interested in kind of expanding their own knowledge of what others are doing. So, their mission they talk about is really in the business of sharing and telling stories. They now do a number of different things. Most recently, it's been led by Jamie Millard. And they've really focused on becoming a self-sufficient enterprise, social enterprise. And so a few years ago in 2013, 2014, Bush Foundation awarded a multi-$100,000 grant and said, this is great what you're doing, but you need to make yourself, self-sustaining, and you need to come up with an earned revenue stream. And so they were doing a lot of different things, from hosting community events, having a digital job board, really trying to build community and having this open forum, but they hadn't necessarily had that earned revenue model in the past. And they realized that what they naturally had done as a platform was shared stories. And so they've actually started to do more marketing digital offerings. And that's been the largest growing segment of their organization, is creating content now for organizations in a very intentional way, talking about whether it's, you know, organizations or individuals that have historically been underserved, and providing kind of that consultative support. So as you can see, the most recent year, it's still trending upward, but over half of their annual revenue has actually come from that earned revenue or program support. The remaining portion is all coming from grants. Like I said, the primary grant is the Bush Foundation, and then they are doing some donations during the year. Most recently, it's been about both self-healing, mental health, and really just creating, I would say, more virtual events the past 6 months. It's free to become a member. I would definitely check it out if you're looking for jobs or looking to connect with community events. Are there any questions about this organization? Awesome. Well, we are going to hear from Ruby next week as you're meeting each of your contacts with the organizations you're going to be working with. I think it is still quick, so we will jump right into the next topic. And this is something I'm really excited to talk about today, is what do you want to be doing after graduation? You're all here, as we talked about last week, because you have an interest in creating impact. That can show up in a lot of different landscapes. And so whether you're interested in going to big business or, you know, specifically corporate social responsibility within a business, or showing up in, you know, local, national government sector, there's also, you know, a rich philanthropic community specifically in the Twin Cities. We actually have several of the largest community and private foundations in the country, with the McKnight Foundation, the Bush Foundation, and a couple other organizations. There's also impact investing, which is a growing space, and we'll actually have a guest speaker later this semester that will talk more about that. At Carlson, many of the students are going into consulting, and so want to talk about what that looks like, specifically those of you that are interested in what impact consulting looks like, or the growing consulting population for nonprofit clients. You might be interested in working for a smaller local nonprofit or a large national nonprofit. Also, whichever you do, you're likely going to be creating content and having to be agile and adapt. And that's really where we see entrepreneurship as filling that void and creating, you know, in white space and starting your own venture. So we're going to create breakout rooms now. And I'd like each of you to figure out which breakout room you'd like to join. And the intent is first to spend 5 minutes talking about why you're interested in that space. We'll all come together and debrief each of these sectors, and we want to start to pick out themes. And then ultimately, it's about figuring out how do we take action. Any questions before I put everyone in breakout rooms? Excellent. So you'll be able to pick your own breakout room. And like I said, the breakout room number corresponds with each of those spaces. So number 1 would be corporate, 2 is government, 3 is philanthropy, 4 is impact investing, etc. You'll be able to manually select which breakout room you'd like to go to. And then Leah and Greg, if you want to hang back for just a sec, and then we will all rotate through. You should now have access to select your breakout room. If anyone is having an issue with that, is it still saying unassigned? You cannot manually.
Not showing up the breakout room button yet.
Okay, if I can close again and try one more time.
I don't know if this matters, but you might have to stop screen sharing. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Nope, it's a setting. Allow participants to choose room. That would make life easier. How's that working now? Perfect.
Could you share the screen again? Sorry.
Yep. No, absolutely. So you each are going to pick a room based on that sector and spend 5 minutes talking about why you are interested in that space.
How do you select a room? Do you just click on?
You go to the right of it, like where the blue is, and then
Oh.
it'll change to join.
Okay, thanks, Leah.
I think my computer isn't updated. I didn't get like an option. Are you able to put me in one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you put me in one, please?
Yep, will do.
I'm in the same boat as Ashley. I'm not seeing it either, but I'd like to go to 1, 2.
Can do.
Thank you.
I'm also in the same boat. Can you possibly put me in number 5?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. And Yushi?
Yeah, I clicked on room 7, but it says it's in progress and it's blank.
There are others in room 7, so I will add you to that now. All right, it looks like we have the majority of folks in room 1, 2, 7. Greg and Leah. Well, Greg, actually, can I put you in room 6 with Ian, who wants to do nonprofit?
Sure.
And just really, it's just about asking what interests him, in that space.
Yep. No problem.
Oh, Ashley, did I do you accidentally?
You did me, yeah.
All right, I'm pulling you back. How do I? So the rooms that look, I'm just looking through. We have the majority of people in room. Oh, I'm gonna actually do a couple things. 1. Continue the recording. So I will take this off presentation mode and would love to know what were the themes that popped up or emerged. Why does each sphere interest you? If we can get started with hearing from corporate.
I think the theme that was kind of running through our group was just the fact that we want to, a lot of what came up was that we feel like we need more experience, and just like you brought it up in our group that like paying off student loans and supporting your lifestyle, coming right out of school, corporate work might be the best opportunity to do that. So that was something that came up, and it was and also it also came up that some people kind of feel bad trying to fundraise and ask for money. So working with a corporation that already has their own income and has their own pool of money that you can work on projects with. That was another interest in our group of going towards corporations rather than like crowd raising and having to actually go out and ask for donations.
All right, did I capture that well? Anything else I should be adding? And government, let's hear from your team.
I can talk a little bit. We all, I feel like government is pretty broad, and we all had different things that interested us about it. Some of us talked about lobbying and being interested in that. Others actually running for public office of some kind. And then we also talked about working on more of a local or state level versus a federal level. but I think like ultimately we all kind of shared the same want to make an impact, and we felt like although government is slow, you're working on more like actionable things that impact everyone depending on like where you're working. So I think that was kind of the common consensus amongst us.
And was there much dialogue of not division, but interest in more local versus more state, national, or what that looks like?
Yeah, we were pretty split on who was more interested in local versus a larger scale, and some of us had experience in like working in different levels and seeing how like it might be slower. You're kind of have to really work yourself up to get anywhere major in a governmental organization.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing a little bit is this trade-off of kind of the pace of the change versus the opportunity for, large scale or like holistic, impact or change. Does that sound right? Is that fitting of what we're group's talking about?
Yeah, I think that's right.
All right, now we have a consulting group. Let's hear from Team 5.
I think one of our major themes was, well, there were a couple, but the ability to learn and problem solve on the job and not just like the same little bubble. A lot of jobs you're like tied down to a certain, I don't want to use vertical because I don't think that's correct, but certain little bubble aspect of your job. And with consulting, it opens the door to a lot of different windows and opportunities that can come your way, where you get a new client, you have to learn their industry, educate yourself, and then move forward and help them solve their problem. So I think that was a big intrigue for our Group 5.
Any other things the consulting group wants to share out? Thank you, Nolan, for including that. And I would expect the consulting group would be able to distill their key takeaways. So very fitting of the space. I think we had, and I want to note groups 3 and 4, I lightened that because we didn't have any individuals. We could talk more about what those industries or sectors look like if you're interested. But right now I want to focus on where each of your interests are at. So how about group 6? Ian, share more.
It was just me. Me and Greg had a nice little conversation. So I guess the interest that I find in nonprofit work is that someday I would love to found and run my own nonprofit. So working with a nonprofit after college would provide a great deal of experience, so I could learn the ins and the outs of how to do that. I guess another thing that we talked about is like developing practical skills such as like finance or marketing or whatnot, that then you could use to actually start up your own business. So that kind of ties into the entrepreneurship theme as well. But
I was gonna say, so it sounds really close that you're interested in that entrepreneurship as well as comfortable wearing a lot of different hats, performing a lot of different functions and acknowledging that that is a reality of that circumstance, especially for smaller organizations.
Absolutely.
Greg, can I put you on the spot as well and talking about why you chose a nonprofit? You talked about previously, wanting to be the president of 3M, and you, I think, went to the other end of the spectrum, and you've done tremendous at that. I think it takes, some bravery to start something that hasn't been started before. So would you mind sharing a little bit about why you chose your nonprofit?
Sure, thank you. I was like 21 years old at the time, or 20, and I had no capital. I mean, our family didn't come from money per se. I mean, we were fine, but I had no capital. So I saw, donations and foundations, whatever, as a source of capital for doing what I wanted to do. Although I can't, I mean, I can't really say that I was thinking about it in those terms 42 years ago, but that's what ended up happening. And I suppose it could have started as a for-profit company, and a lot of people did that, but just where I came from with my background, thought the nonprofit route was best.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we're going to talk more about in the next few minutes, is the fact that there's such a blending and emergence in this space of, we heard from corporate folks that they have an interest and a passion for focusing more on impact, but there's awkwardness around fundraising. And so how, not only is there awkwardness, but there's also vulnerability. How are we creating a long-term plan if we don't have that time horizon or stability of knowing that we're going to have income coming in the door? So there's challenges that emerge with that. We'll talk more about those themes, but I want to hear from our entrepreneurship group as well, group 7.
I think a lot of our themes were kind of surrounding the autonomy that you get with entrepreneurship and your ability to really target a social cause that you personally care a lot about versus maybe going off of an organization's agenda. You kind of have that freedom. We all also had past experiences kind of like in the startup space, or like family members who have done entrepreneurship. So we've seen the benefits firsthand in that regard as well.
Would you speak a little more specifically to benefits? I think it's important to be clear of what does opportunity look like. Is it about work-life balance? Is it about earnings potential? Is it about risk versus reward?
For me personally, I don't think we didn't talk about it as much, but I'd say it's more the risk versus reward. So if you have the ability to really put it all on the line and launch something, I think your potential impact can be very large, especially if you're going after a very targeted social cause. Yeah, you can kind of put all of your time and energy into really solving that problem. But I'd love anyone else in my group to put their insights as well.
I think a lot of people think entrepreneurship brings a lot of flexibility, but it's like once you're doing this thing, you know you're working 80 hours a week and stuff. You really don't have much time for yourself or to have like a really good work-life balance. But you trade it. It's a trade-off. Like you trade it for your passion, right? You're really passionate about this thing, and you are willing to sacrifice everything else just for this cause. So that's if you have to call it a benefit, that's the benefit you get. You're solving the problem you're seeing, and you're really building something from ground up.
Yushi, you have said that so well. Thank you. I think so important is acknowledging trade-offs, that it's an opportunity to really pursue your passion. And we hear that phrase all the time, but really I think what it means is to focus on the problems that you care most about and things that you might have a natural curiosity or inclination. And so the trade-off is you might historically have been doing that outside of work time, and now that becomes work time. And so, as Yushi said, you're putting in maybe more sweat equity and time and energy than you would in another role, but it's things that you're really, I think about it less of work-life balance and more of work-life integration, that you're acknowledging you're going to put more sweat equity than if you had a 9-to-5 role. But that's something because you see benefit in that. So thank you each so much for sharing about what interests you about the space. I want to acknowledge that, we've talked previously on Tuesday. We're going to talk a lot more this semester. It's about sharing out, sharing why you think what you think, listening to your colleagues and classmates, hearing from them, and then we're going to be iterating. So it's really important, and I appreciate that. It's what makes this valuable. So we're going to spend a few more minutes talking about, if you're interested in this space, what do you see as the barrier to success? And to me, that means two things. It's the barrier to entry to be starting in that space and succeeding. And then I also want to think about it from an impact lens of where do you think that space is falling short on having an impact? Once again, we're going to do the breakout rooms.
So me and Greg kind of talked about barriers to entry of starting a nonprofit, I guess, just because that's a little bit more specific to me since I was the only student in the group. So some barriers to entry are like Greg talked about employee turnover, and like once you start a nonprofit, it's a lot of sweat equity, like we talked about. But then you're going to have to start hiring employees as your organization grows. And being a nonprofit, it's harder to offer like a competitive salary. So a lot of times you're going to be hiring younger people who are just looking to get their foot in the door with a job. And then, 2-3 years down the road, right when they're getting like good at the business, they leave. So that was a problem. And then just like also there's a lot of competition for like grants and for donations. And especially, so like something that I'm personally interested in like working in homelessness. So there's just like a ton of homeless shelters out there, and there's systemic issues with your average homeless shelter. So like, I don't know, there's a lot of issues there that make creating your own nonprofit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit on a lot of important things. The word trade-offs is going to come up a lot. And so when you talk about the fact that there's real cost both in your time investment as well as financially when you have employees, of getting them up to speed on the issues and really to be a productive member of that team. If you're losing them, how do we acknowledge kind of like the realities of that circumstance and then play that to our favor? That if you have larger leadership opportunities and responsibilities, how are we better marketing that for individuals? Because like you said, if compensation, we're not going to win on that topic compared to other industries. That I think we can talk more about why we have markets incentivized the way that they are, but also acknowledging like the reality of the circumstance. How can we accentuate things that are better, in that environment, and what trade-offs look like? All right, thank you. Government and consulting, who would like to go next?
I can go for consulting. A few of the barriers to entry that we talked about are just like the really competitive nature of the industry and trying to get in. We also talked about how like trying to like go directly from college to consulting, the firms are like looking for a very specific kind of experience or background. So if you don't have that,
just pause you. Are you saying government or consulting?
Consulting, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I didn't catch it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's just very competitive to get in. We were also talking about how like especially at Carlson, they like really want you to go to like a very specific type of firm and like use that like formula of like get an internship sophomore year, get one like junior year. And if you don't have that, it can be like a real barrier to like getting in. We didn't talk too much about like barriers to making an impact, but we did talk a little bit about wanting to do work for maybe like nonprofits that have more like issues or like just need more help, but that the firms don't really like see that as valuable because they probably aren't able to like pay for those services. And something too that like has just been a concern for me personally, we didn't talk about this, but is like once you get in, you're like so like bottom and like entry level that like you don't have much control of like what projects you get and like what kind of impact you can make. And so you either have to like stay for a while or like change careers is kind of like how I see it. So that's like another kind of barrier to making an impact. And if anyone else in my group would like to contribute, I would love that.
Yeah, I just think the biggest barrier to impact probably someone in our group had brought up the nonprofit work and the lack of consulting presence in the nonprofit area. And I mean, I think that really kind of stems back to the lack of potential for profit in comparison to other major for-profit corporations that they could be working with. And so I think that's probably a really large barrier to impact in the industry. You know, like the legal law firms will do pro bono work. And to my knowledge, I'm not sure that, I guess I don't know if consulting firms do that, but if they do, it's not like advertised as you know, this great thing that they do to help maybe other verticals that aren't being served the way that they need to be. So.
Absolutely. And once again, I would emphasize why we're at such a unique moment here with the blending of more and more nonprofits that are looking to diversify their revenue channels, as well as for-profit organizations that are raising their hand and saying, we are intentionally going to have specific either initiatives or ways of doing business that are incorporating, you know, these externalities. I think you can get Greg talking a lot on his organization really, you know, looked at how do we create, you know, that self-sufficiency, that earned revenue program, and go from an organization that's reliant on whether it's donations or applying for grants on an annual basis to an organization that feels confident in what, you know, its runway into the future looks like.
One thing that I would add, because obviously with these projects that you're going to be working on, you're essentially serving as consultants, and there's always the challenge of, you know, I don't think that this will be the case with the projects that you're working with, but as a consultant, you do the research, you make the recommendations, and then you hand it off. And so there's no guarantee that they're going to take your recommendations. There's no guarantee that they're going to implement your recommendations. You know, sometimes you work with a client and it's like they want you to confirm what they already think and assume and tell them that they're doing it right. And it's maybe a check the box exercise versus like, if you're looking to make impact and reckon with social inequities, like there's some hard soul searching that has to happen at a personal and a like institutional level. And so that there can be that tension of how do you push and advocate while maintaining a client relationship to keep moving the needle.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah, thank you each. And how about our government group?
So I think what Sage said about the like lack of impact upon entry is something that we talked about in terms of like barriers to making an impact. So whether you're looking at like federal or state level, it can be hard to make an impact right away because there's a lot of like hierarchy. And then so that depends on what part of government you're working on, right? And so do the barriers to entry. We were talking about the differences between like local government and state or federal government in terms of like finding an entry-level position, whether or not it will be paid, whether like you're going to get a job through word of mouth or through a job board, things like that. So I think it really depends on what you're interested in doing and whether you have access to those like initial steps, I guess. If anyone else wants to add, that would be great. But
and so I heard a little bit about how the opportunities, it's not that they're created, but how you can become connected with opportunities, whether it's networking or job boards. Am I capturing that right? Or
yeah.
What would you say?
I think that's right, especially because even within our group, like some of us are interested in lobbying, some are interested in local government, some are federal. So like they're all different. There's not one way that you're going to find a job. So I think that's definitely the right way to say it.
Yeah. Well, I think as we step back and look across different industries, it's really important to acknowledge the similarities and then the differences that exist within each. You know, whether it's the competitive nature of finding an opportunity and really understanding, how do I create a roadmap? Like, what am I going to be doing? What's my action plan to step into that industry? You know, unfortunately, after you graduate college, that is up to you to build your roadmap. And so I want to make sure we're talking about that in class. We've talked about previously, but this is a tremendous opportunity and network that you will have of speakers coming in. And so I encourage you to think intentionally of, how are you building connections? How are you seeking out individuals that are leaders in each of these spaces that you want to be connecting to? I know for the consulting group, we heard that, you know, Carlson as a school, they're endorsing, you know, kind of that process of entry into that space. And so if I don't feel like I'm on kind of the track that, you know, the school overall is endorsing, how do I pave my own way, or how do I make sure to surround myself with folks that are going to help connect me to where I want to go? So I just want to conclude this. This will be quick, but just spend a couple minutes talking about, why do you think each of you are well suited for this sector? You're each graduating from a top business school. You've, you know, taken a lot of courses, learned different concepts. How do you think you could be adding value to each of these spaces? If there's any questions. One of the things we did not ask, I will launch the quick poll now, but it's talking about what type of clarity each of you have as we're talking about these different fields. How many of you would say you know your roadmap of, you know, where you're going? All right, it looks like we have just about everyone's response. So I think this is a really important thing to acknowledge, because I feel like often we have conversations of where we want to go, and we kind of have this aspirational vision of, you know, where we can be. But now I want to have the conversation that each of you have the skill sets and the assets that you can bring to these different spaces. And it's really just about, you know, make the plan and then, you know, work that plan. And so much is the self-confidence when you're in those rooms, and we'll talk more about that through the semester, but just acknowledging that, you know, we have work to do. And unfortunately, it's not a particular class that you get that done in. That has to be on your own time, but you have so many resources around you to get you there. Okay, so back to talking about how your interests and skills align with this space. What were some of the major takeaways? And can we actually have entrepreneurship group? I talked to you briefly, but I would love for you to share out what you talked about.
Yeah, for sure. So in a very unique sense, we talked about a lot of characteristics that it takes to succeed in entrepreneurship, but it's almost like a different breed of that. For example, just like general grit to lie in so much ambiguity and to take failure after failure and just kind of keep rolling with it. And just to have confidence in what you're doing when all else seems to be saying otherwise. So that was a big thing. Another one was just, again, having your passion and just being able to go all out for it was big ones we talked about.
Yeah, the idea that they're like usually entrepreneurs are very much risk takers that are willing to really put everything out on the line to try and see a vision come to life. And actually, after you left Matt, our group started talking about the fact that you have to take these really big risks. So how do you have the confidence to take those risks and really jump in? And so we were just brainstorming as a group ways of possibly having, that backup plan of like, if all else fails, am I going to be okay for X amount of months until I can figure out a plan B for a job or some sort of income?
Yeah, absolutely. And the confidence, it doesn't just come. So I think it's also about, we talk about building our network or building kind of our routines. I think it's important to assess the information I'm reading, is that feeding positively into my confidence, or am I doing things that are adversely affecting me? So it all plays in to, who we're becoming and how we're showing out to those around us. So what other group would like to share next?
I could talk. So me and Greg talked about how, oh man. Well, so I guess I started the conversation saying that my interests are in the area of like homelessness. So, I mean, just having like a little bit of a passion about what I would want to do as a job kind of sets me up on the right path. And then also, like you said, Matt, how we're graduating from like a top business school. Through all of my experiences here, I've developed a lot of like interpersonal skills, confidence when it comes to just like talking with higher up people if I need something from them per se. And then, oh man, what else were we saying? Yeah, I mean, like, Greg, if you want to jump in here and touch on anything else, I mean, we talked about like stuff that wasn't necessarily skills and interests, but
I'm going to write this in for you, is I think business acumen. Each of you, I think, often underplay really how much you're bringing to the table, even just talking about barrier to entry and thinking with that type of framework as you enter conversations is something that organizations, when they're strapped, for cash and making sure the day-to-day operation, is running, it's not that they don't have that aptitude, but they're just in the thick of the day-to-day. And so your ability to balance those day-to-day challenges while stepping back and looking strategically at how do you make something better? How do you have a continuous improvement mindset? Are all things that I think you bring to the table along with those soft skills. And yeah, Greg, anything else you want to add to that, please do. All
yeah,
right.
what I was going to say.
Go ahead.
I was going to say. Sorry, Matt. Was what we talked about with Ian was to think about niching. I mean, if you're starting a nonprofit or if you're an entrepreneur, get a feel for the industry or the field or the realm that you're looking at and figure out what's not being done. I mean, what is everybody doing, and then what are people not doing, and where are the opportunities? And I remember one of my most valuable lessons from the Carlson School was that if you're starting a business, there's only two guaranteed avenues for success. One is to be the low cost producer, the Walmart of the industry, or the other is to be recognized as the luxury producer, the high end. So you either had high end or low end. And if you couldn't do one of those, which most people can't, then you got a niche somewhere in the middle, and start with a niche, and then you can expand it from there. And then that's really the strategy for success. And
absolutely.
I found that to be totally true.
And I also want to give accolades, Ian. You're the only one that selected the nonprofit sector. I think it's very similar to what we see as a market as a whole. In terms of, it's so fitting your interest in homelessness, that's an area that does not get attention unless we have passion for those cause areas. So I think as we talk about kind of the need for each of these spaces, each serves its purpose. And our goal this semester will be just more transparency around, what are the assets and what are the shortcomings of each of these spaces, and how do we do a better job for those that are going to play in each space. Okay, who would like to go next?
I can go for corporate. We were kind of just talking about how our ability to make relationships will serve us well. We did identify that we didn't feel like this skill set was necessarily unique to corporate. It was just kind of like a skill set that will get us further in life, but that it didn't necessarily apply like only to the corporate setting. And then we also talked about, the acumen, the specific acumen that we're each bringing with like whether it's HR, finance, or marketing or whatever it may bring. That like skill set will align well, and then pairing that with the ability to make relationships is like a nice little marriage of the two.
Absolutely. The other thing I would emphasize is we're living at a moment where roles are becoming more and more morphed. And so your ability to be agile and to be the marketing person that understands finance, or the HR person that understands what the marketing team is doing, plays really well into essentially your runway or future opportunities. Because I think back to organizations having finance analyst 1, finance analyst 2, finance manager, finance director. Jobs are just becoming more shifting. They're utilizing outsourced talent. They're using consultants to accentuate internal functions. That relationship that you have and the acumen you bring, I think, is really going to play well into that space. Okay, and we have government and consulting. Let's hear from both teams.
I can go for consulting. I think pretty commonly and broadly in our group, we talked about the ability to have an aptitude to learn and problem solve. Obviously, that's going to be crucial as you consult clients on major decisions for their company, as well as the ability to communicate effectively and clearly. Obviously, that's very, very important. We also talked about this idea of being a generalist and how it's actually not, which would mean someone who knows a lot about a lot of things, or knows a lot, essentially, rather than an expert in one specific field. We talked about how it seems as though in the past, maybe that was a negative thing, but really working that to be a positive thing in the sense that you're humble and you know that you don't know the answers to everything, but you're going to find out, and you have zero doubt that you have the ability to find out and help these people. And then also acumen. I know it's been mentioned in a lot of these other groups, but I think that's crucial in terms of consulting and working with other companies.
You are playing so well into the next conversation we're going to have, is the fact that each of you are going to be working with an organization this semester. You are going to be the consultant for the organization. And so each of the things we just talked about, having that growth mindset, being able to communicate both written and verbal. And then I think, Nolan, you said it better than I could, but I think of it as that quiet confidence where you're not bragging that you know a particular topic, but you're bringing your knowledge and listening to what leadership is saying, what they're seeing, and then you're adding your insights. I think are really important skill sets as you're working with clients. We'll talk more about that in a couple minutes. Before that, I want to make sure we hear from our government team.
Yeah, I can start us off.
Go
and
ahead.
as business students, it's not exactly sexy to say you want to go into government. It's thought of as being slow, and you could make more money in the private sector. But like the jobs have to be done, like these functional jobs like HR, finance, IT. It all has to be done in government, and just the security and sort of the structure of government is actually appealing to some of us. And even as a citizen, it feels almost like it's your duty to some degree to try to keep society running as well as it can.
Absolutely. I think so much we live in a day and age, without taking this like to meta, but a lot of our sense of community is changing. Historically, folks went to a community center, and unfortunately, community centers are going away. Where we physically lived is we live you know, out in suburbs where there's only housing and we don't know our neighbors and there's just less sense of community. It's the folks that are willing to be those community ambassadors and have that sense of duty are going to bring us all together and hopefully have less polarization, you know, and help each other empathize and understand from others' perspectives. Anything else that we want to talk as takeaways before we move on? Leah, tell us more. Coalition building. Absolutely true.
Yeah, so I think, you know, with anything on a policy level, designing by committee and finding a way to make everyone equally unhappy is a very cynical way to put it. But, you know, figuring out what shared interests are with different perspectives and competing priorities, you know, dealing with trade-offs and figuring out sort of what's your next step, what's your medium-term goal, what's your long-term goal. And so getting folks on the same page to balance and figure out what the actionable through lines are is super important for government, because if everybody's siloed and saying, well, no, it has to be this way, there is no other way, you know, then nothing's going to happen. So
Absolutely.
Connecting those dots is really important.
So to me, it's that participatory voice. So we can make a decision for change, but if we don't have that organic kind of grassroots endorsement of the change we're making, it's not going to be well received, and likely we're going to cause more division. So as you talked about the coalition building, I think understanding, you know, to use our business acumen, it's voice of the customer. It's understanding how do people feel about the change and how do we build kind of a sense of a unified path forward. So we've talked a lot today about what different avenues and opportunities look like for the impact landscape. I hope your main takeaway is that you can make an impact and create change in whichever space you want to go. We need you that are going to be focused on making a positive impact in business, in nonprofit, in government. And most importantly, as we'll talk about concepts throughout this class, is that entrepreneurial mindset is something that you can bring into whichever role you have. So I realize we went long on this topic today. I think it's really important. So I'm going to skip this next one. We'll talk more about our service learning projects on Tuesday, and then acknowledge that next Thursday, the entire class period will be hearing from the 7 organizations that we're going to be working with. We're going to hear about what the organization's mission is, who they're working with, and then specifically what the projects are. I would encourage you on the syllabus, it will show all the websites, start poking around at that. And then on Tuesday, we're going to talk about how do we become the most productive clients we can, both for our own growth and then for the benefit of the clients we're working with. I'm leaving you with today's question of the day is really, what is the responsibility of business, of your role? And then we also, on the syllabus, you'll see a YouTube video, Harvard business professor, Rebecca Henderson, who has written this book, Reimagining Capitalism, is now a staple at Harvard Business School and really lays out what she sees as kind of the critical pieces of the future of business. We'll start the conversation on Tuesday with that. If you have any questions, feel free to hang back. And with that, everyone have a great weekend. I'll see you on Tuesday.
Have a great
Thank
week.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.